Hello and welcome everyone to another InventRight TV show. My name is Andrew Kraus. I'm one of the co-founders here at InventRight, and we have a very special guest today. His name is Jeff Marcus, and he's a medical doctor. He'll tell you a little bit more about that. He's also an InventRight student, and his coach, Paul Sorensen, who is also our negotiation coach, is the gentleman that's been helping him. So today he's going to talk about his second deal that he's closed. He's going to talk about inventing medical products. Going to talk about how some doctors don't think that our process might apply and why that's not true. And then also how if you're not a doctor, how you can invent medical products too. So we were just the three of us were just kind of chit-chatting before this, trying to figuring out what we're going to talk about. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. And it's just really kind of casual. And I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll definitely learn something. So Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to see you.
So Paul, bring us up to speed on what Jeff has accomplished so far.
Yeah, so he's been with us for quite some time now, and he came in just as a normal student. He just so happens to be a surgeon and has skills and knowledge in that field. As we were talking a minute ago, he was actually inventing in another field also, but his first deal was in the medical field and has been very successful. He's had that for several years now, and now is applying the same principles to do and to his next product. So I don't know, it's been awesome to work with him. It's just nice to see somebody with that kind of skill set and applying these things that we typically see from non-professionals like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes a really cool story here.
Jeff, so tell us a little bit about what you do. You're a surgeon?
Yeah, so I'm a craniofacial surgeon or plastic surgeon, and I specialize in a lot of facial reconstruction in kids and in adults,
Oh.
um, and I've been doing this for I've been 20 plus years in my current role.
Now, you were saying you since you're licensing these products now and you recommended to some doctors our book One Simple Idea, and they're like, "Oh, that's not going to work for this. It only works for, toys and kitchen stuff and whatever." And what did you tell them?
Well, the some background too is that in the when I started with the first idea I had, which I only figured out later on that it fits right into the framework of One Simple Idea. This was going back to like 2008, and it was before I'd even discovered the strategies and philosophies that Stephen talks about. But I actually had good mentorship, good from a colleague and friend, and without that, I don't know if it would ever worked out for me. But I followed a lot of instincts and just got very, very lucky in following those instincts to have that all get to fruition. Then at some point later, I discovered the book first, and as I looked through, I'm like, this is the blueprint. This is what I did. I'm like, this is what I followed. It just I lucked into each of these steps, and I'm like, but here it is. It's actually all kind of spelled out. And so everything I've done since then, whether it's worked or not, I've sort of followed that pathway. And then word gets out a little bit as I was, as we were talking about, and other surgeons, colleagues and friends of mine, I've talked to them about it. They come to me asking, well, what did you do? How did this work out? And I said, listen, you need to look at this book. Start with that, and then I'm going to put you in, and then you should look at inventRight, because it teaches this. And then sometimes I'll get I'll get the feedback. They'll say, no, this is that's not for us. This we're surgeons. This is surgical devices. It's too complicated. They're talking about tools and hardware and so forth. I'm like, I'm listening. I'm like, and I try to explain. Listen, the ideas are still simple and they follow the same principles. It all follows the same. And so hopefully, those who, if they listen to me, then I think they'll actually have an easier time.
I always say licensing's licensing. Doesn't matter if it's a dog toy or a kitchen device or a medical product. There are certain things like, the medical companies, they care more about patents than somebody
Yeah.
selling a kitchen gadget. So there are certain details with certain industries. But licensing's licensing. The InventRight 10 steps is the InventRight 10 steps. I agree with you. It works.
And I, in the time, since in working, particularly like with this most recent one, so yeah, there was the IP was, pretty important, really. But the thing is, like, with working with Paul, like he gets it, he understands it as well. I mean, not, you know, the things that I need the most help with are the things that he's infinitely great at, which is on the negotiation side, understanding, you know, licenses. And it's, you know, at least for, I can speak for doctors, you know, surgeons, we know nothing of this, right? So you know, we have, you look at a few deals, maybe, maybe if it's your first one, you've seen none, but you know, you have Paul who's done hundreds. And you know, as we looked at these deals ourselves, and he and I looked particularly at the last one, they're the same. They're the same. The terms are, you know, they're very similar. And so you know, you need help to know like whether somebody is being honest with you. Are they being straightforward with you? Are they taking advantage of you? Because frankly, a lot of times, you know, I think physicians actually are very much at risk of being taken advantage of.
Hmm.
I think
I've
quite
seen
often
it.
we're very naive.
Yeah, I've seen it happen before. Well, you're very busy and you're like, oh, I can just go over here and have somebody take care of it, and they end up with the wrong people, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
And I think that, you know, often like people, you know, there's some level of, you know, there's, you know, just inherent sense of generosity too. It's like, oh, well, you know, I don't need to, you know, go after that. And they're just, we're
Mm.
not good negotiators. It's just not in our DNA.
Yeah, yeah. So for people that are not doctors, you had mentioned that people can totally invent in medical. And I had mentioned, well, you know, if you're a patient in the hospital and you make observations, the things, the way they put the Band-Aid on, the way they put the IV in, all sorts of stuff, the way you got prepped for surgery, there's a lot of things that you can invent, even if you're not a doctor. And and you brought this up, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you like, okay, so there's one example, and I'll use like kind of like, you know, off of something that, you know, Stephen talks about. So, you know, if you're looking for ideas and, you know, one thing, you know, he talks about, you know, he'd walk down the aisles in a toy store just to kind of think of things, gets his brain going. I would walk down the aisles in the storage areas in the surgery, you know, in the operating room, and I'd just kind of get my brain going that way. It's kind of like walking through the aisles of the store. I mean, I'm just like thinking about, you know, what different things that we do and what do we use and where the problems are, or you might actually be in the operating room and you have just, if you're just attuned to like what's not working here, you know, what is really annoying here, and what problems might we see, you know, that works for me, you know, as a surgeon. But there's a whole nother side to it, which is from the patient's point of view, which we don't know always. Like we think we know, but we may not. And so, you know, to your point, a patient's experience might lead them to say, you know, these people could do this a lot better. XYZ
Mhm.
thing. You know, so for example, like I take care of a lot of children with cleft lip and palate, right? So these are infants who have, you know, facial, you know, they're 3 months old, and you've done this complex surgery and you don't want them to mess it up. And so, you know, one thing we'll do is we'll put on these sort of Velcro immobilizers on, you know, for their elbows so that their hands kind of go like this so they can't get their fingers up to manipulate, you know, this repair of the palate. And it works, and they work fine and all. But you know, there was a parent who at some point said, you know, that's really uncomfortable. It looks like it's, you know, looks like it's really annoying for the kids. And they came up with this, you know, really clever, like sort of papoose type of a thing that is so much more, you know, it's so much easier actually, and so much better.
Mhm.
It's soft. It's you know, it looks much more comfortable for the babies. She invented it, and I use it. You know, I tell my patients, you know, I show them where to go on the website and where they can pull it up. Would I have ever come up with that? No, I didn't realize how annoying the other thing was.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, you weren't experiencing. So yeah, through observation seems to be the best. What are your thoughts about looking through? There's all sorts of medical supply houses online. You can go to websites, look through products. People might not know what they're looking at. What do you think about a doctor doing that in their area, or a not a different area, or a non-doctor doing that? Is that productive if you're
Um,
doing inventing medical?
that's interesting. I don't actually, I don't know. I think that one of the things I can only know, you know, I kind of know the creative process for myself, which is usually it has to do with where's the pain point, you know? So identify a pain point that I've noticed or experienced myself, and that way I might, you know, realize where something could be done better. And
Sure.
then and it also gives me a sense about like the scope or the magnitude of that problem.
Hmm.
Because the two keys are, you know, one is that in at least for licensing, we're talking not talking about like venturing and making a company, which is what I don't, you know, I don't really want to do. But, you know, the idea has to be rather, you know, hopefully straightforward, simple, and practical, but then also have, you know, some reasonably broad applicability. So you know, to have something that's used I have residents and trainees that I work with a lot, and they'll come up with an idea and they tell me, I want to do this, this, this. I'm like, okay, well, that'll get used like 10 times in the year.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge when you're looking at stuff, if you were to look in like device or supply kinds of publication and so on, you wouldn't really unless you were in the know, you wouldn't know how needy it is, how useful would that be? Like if you have like if you imagine like a graph, like where you have simplicity and frequency, you would love to have the most simple used the most frequently.
Yes.
And so you want to be like that's a sweet spot somewhere in that quadrant, where it's used
Right.
quite a bit and
So
still is.
looking through a medical supply catalog, if you notice, wow, there's like 50 products in this space. There's like none
Yeah.
here. Well, you could invent where there's none, but you also know there's a demand. It gives you an idea of the marketplace, what we call studying the marketplace, right? And I noticed that sometimes doctors and nurses, they only know what their hospital does. Like they
Yes.
don't necessarily go out and search. I'm like, still got to study the marketplace. Well, this is how we do it here. I'm like, well, and this is the company we use, and that's why I want to license to this company. I'm like, well, there might be five others. So you
Yeah.
definitely want to do that.
That's
Paul,
that's a
go ahead.
great.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say it's a great point because and that's also I think one of the invent sort of strategies, which is sometimes you don't go to the biggest of the big. Sometimes you want to work with someone who's hungry, a company, and you don't always know who they are. And so
Mm-hmm.
Paul, like for in actually in my most recent thing, we were talking about it, and I was working with somebody who I did that. I was looking at a leader, and he's let's go through this. Let's go through everybody who's all out there. Let's figure this out. And I ended up going with somebody who's you would consider more of like it would be more of an up and comer.
Mm-hmm. Paul, how did the negotiation go?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, like Jeff was saying, a lot of times these bigger companies or even the medium-sized companies have adopted these contracts that aren't necessarily super great contracts, but that's what they've used, and so that's what they offer.
Mm-hmm.
And like Jeff was saying, is I think that those companies assume that the doctor is just going to sign away. Um, and sometimes they do, because if you haven't seen contracts before, you're like, I don't know, I don't even necessarily know what the ramifications of that are, but I guess if that's what they're giving me, that's what I need to do. And that's not the case. We want to make sure that it is right for you, or you as the licensor, the inventor. We don't necessarily want to just sign whatever they throw over because that's what they're used to doing. And so
Yeah.
we can present our revision to the wording or whatever in a way that a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's not a
Well,
big.
let's talk a little bit about that. In my experience, the medical device companies, they'll beat you up a little bit more in the negotiations than some others, although others can be bad too. How was this negotiation? Was it pretty smooth? You had some bumps? You had some bumps?
Paul, we want to talk about that.
No, you don't have to get into detail, more broad. I
Paul was
mean,
being generous. Yeah, he was being kind. Yeah, sometimes they don't they can be rather one-sided, and you can move them some, and we did. Um, and it's a scenario where if I had gone into that particular one, without having like a sort of I'd look at, Paul's like kind of a secret weapon because they don't know, he's in the
mm,
background. They don't know who I deal with or who's helping me, or if anyone. And so that's kind of a secret weapon. I mean, you look at it and I'm like, I didn't think this looks really good. He goes, that is not good. So, we had to work on that quite a bit.
Paul, your new title is not inventRight negotiation coach. It's Paul Sorensen's secret weapon. But
Secret
I,
weapon.
I agree with that. They really let their guard down, and I think it's a great strategy that we use here at inventRight, where you as the inventor, when we're coaching and mentoring, you're dealing directly with the company, and Paul's got you behind the
Absolutely.
scenes, and they let their guard down, and you're not going to sign anything that's not okay. So it really helps things flow better too. There's not two attorneys arguing with each other, you know.
No, there's no question. I mean, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know if I've something I've forgotten because I'm so used to it. I'm used to it now, but
That's great.
it is so important if you can do it, doing it on your own. I would agree for especially for a doctor, because they're assuming that we're coming at it with very little knowledge, right? And if you're just doing it on your own, you can take advantage of that position actually, because they're making a false assumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. You guys have anything else you want to add to this? Anything you want to say encouraging to our audience about inventing in general, the InventRight process, inventing medical products? Is there anything else you guys want to share?
No, I mean, I've actually, I think that, I mean, it covers quite a bit of like what was, what it was on my mind. I think that, there's so much for surgeons and physicians, surgeons in particular, I'll say, I mean, there's such a wealth of information. I just, sometimes I think that in medicine, there's this idea or this, this philosophy that the only way that you can innovate is to venture, create a company and so on. And, if you have an idea that requires, you have to have a laboratory, and you're going to have to, you're going to do with animal models, and you're going to deal with testing, and we're going to have, it's a difficult, it's a pharmaceutical, it's a
Hmm.
complicated device, whatever that might be. There's an idea that that's the only pathway, and actually in the medical schools, even my own, I mean, that's in our innovations sort of milieu or curriculum and enterprise, that's what's discussed, or even at national like society meetings when they talk about
Yeah.
innovation. Um, no, very few people ever talk about licensure, but as we all are aware, I mean, very few things in venture actually pan out. Your odds are so much better if you're an idea person. They won't all work, but the thing is, your ideas keep coming, and
Mm.
eventually you might have a good one. But when you do have a good one, and if it's simple enough, it doesn't have to follow that sort of pathway. And, if you enjoy your day job like I do, then it allows you to create and to bring ideas that can then be, that can get into an operating room, in my case, within, maybe just a couple of years.
Hmm. Are the ideas going to keep flowing for you, Jeff? How are you
I
doing?
can't,
What are your plans?
I think one of my issues is that and for better, for better, I guess. I mean, I can't seem to make them stop. So, now they're not all good is the thing. But if they're if a good one gets through every now and then I'll continue. I mean, it's
Hey, as
fun.
long as you're not testing that so-so idea on the operating table, like
Uh,
it's all good.
I mean, there's no way to do that.
I'm just
Yeah,
kidding. As a bad joke. I had to tell it.
but yeah, I mean, I think that like problem there, just different people look at things in different ways. I mean, my specialty is sort of creative and deals with a lot of problem solving anyway, and so it's sort of like baked into the way I think about stuff.
Hmm.
And so I'll always try to like, I always think about, couldn't this be done, a little bit differently? Um, and I find it like, to me, it's energizing. I do love what I do in surgery, but I really get kind of energized by the idea of doing something better.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, this is really motivational, I think, for any other doctor that wants to invent, realize they don't need to start a business. They can license it and they can get help to do so. And I think it's also encouraging for audience members that are not doctors. And you're saying you can totally invent in medical, but keep it to the simpler stuff.
Yeah,
But
you
you can
keep it to
totally.
what like if
Yeah.
your experience, just think about your experience. That's the way to look at a lot of things. What is it? What about this experience could have been better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Paul, you have anything to share
Yeah,
in
I
closing?
think that that's one thing that inhibits a lot of professionals, whether you're a surgeon or whatever else, is you're already busy and you like what you do, and so you're a little reluctant to venture into something because you think it is going to require a
Hmm.
lot of time and a lot of money, and eventually leaving what you're doing, and that's actually the worst way to go about it. The best way
Yeah.
is to learn the simple process, follow that, license it, and wash your hands of it, and then keep those creative ideas coming. And what I've found is the individuals that do that and repeat it, you hone your skills, you get better and better at not only coming up with ideas, but really vetting those ideas. So you only put efforts into the ones that, from what you've learned, have a better uh, opportunity to net some
Hmm.
royalties. And
Yeah.
that just gets better. It's just like anything. The more you use those muscles, the better they get, whether it's creative or otherwise. So
Yeah.
I love that concept, and I see it quite often. It's interesting. I see it both ways. I see some people that come and they can't wait to get their products producing royalties so they can quit what they're doing. And then I get the other side that they have no intention, they don't have any desire to quit what they're doing, but they want, both sides want the same thing and can get there.
It's,
And
I
the
will say
nice
this,
thing
it's
is,
nice to know, it's nice to know that you could quit though.
yeah,
Yeah. That is exciting.
that's
Well,
right.
Jeff, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to share with our audience your experience. And if what you're saying isn't encouraging, I don't know what would be for you guys. So very encouraging. Paul, thank you so much for helping Jeff. I'm sure he's appreciative of your help. And Jeff, great job doing the work that you need to do to make things happen. And I think we're going to be hearing from you again. Can you come back on when you license another one? You license your
Absolutely.
third? All right, cool.
Absolutely.
It's
I'm
been a lot of
grateful.
fun to
I'm
work with.
grateful for the help.
It's been a lot of fun working with Jeff, and we've actually become good friends, and so that makes it even more fun. So thanks,
Nice.
Jeff. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your friendship.
Me
All
too.
right. Hey, everybody, take care, keep inventing, and we'll catch up with you guys next time. See ya. Bye.
Thanks.